Hey guys, tonight we're going to experience every level of medieval knighthood, starting from a nervous 7-year-old page carrying messages through castle hallways. So before you get comfortable, take a moment like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey toward knighthood begins long before you ever hold a sword, ride a horse, or dramatically remove a helmet after a battle. In fact, it begins with something far less heroic: being born into the right family. Unlike modern careers, where people occasionally pretend hard work alone determines success, medieval society was refreshingly honest about favoritism. If your father was a knight, nobleman, or wealthy landowner, your chances of becoming a knight were excellent. If your father was a peasant, your chances were roughly equal to becoming the Pope's pet dragon. You were born into a noble household somewhere in medieval Europe. Perhaps your family controls a small manor, perhaps a larger estate. Whatever the size, your future is already being discussed by adults while you are still mastering the complex art of not falling into a fireplace. The world around you feels ancient, noisy, and surprisingly crowded. Servants move constantly through the halls carrying food, firewood, tools, and messages. Dogs sleep wherever they please. Horses fill the stables outside. Chickens wander into places where chickens have absolutely no business being. Medieval people simply accepted this as part of daily life. Your home may be called a castle, but do not imagine endless luxury. Stone walls look impressive from a distance. Up close, they are cold, damp, and remarkably effective at reminding you that central heating has not yet been invented. During winter, everyone crowds around fireplaces while drafts sneak through every crack in the building. A medieval castle could withstand a siege, but it often struggled against February. As a young noble child, however, you enjoy privileges unavailable to most people. While peasant children are learning how to work fields and tend livestock, you are learning prayers, manners, family history, and basic literacy. Tutors and priests supervise your education. They are determined to shape you into a respectable young noble. You are determined to find ways around your lessons. Meals become training exercises disguised as dinner. You learn how to sit properly, speak respectfully, and avoid embarrassing your family. Reaching across the table, speaking out of turn, or stuffing your face like a hungry wolf earns immediate correction. Medieval etiquette was serious business. Entire reputations could be damaged by improper spoon management. At night, stories capture your imagination. Travelling minstrels sing of legendary knights who slay enemies, defend kingdoms, and win everlasting glory. Veterans tell stories of famous battles and heroic charges. Everything sounds magnificent. Curiously, nobody ever sings ballads about dysentery, infected wounds, or spending 3 hours scraping mud off a horse. The stories make knighthood seem like the greatest life imaginable. A shining warrior rides across the countryside, respected by nobles and feared by enemies. What young boy would not dream of such a future? What you do not yet realize is that the path to becoming a knight begins not with glory, but with years of obedience, discipline, and carrying things for people who outrank you. For now, though, you remain a child. You run through castle courtyards, chase dogs, annoy servants, and enjoy the final years of freedom before adulthood arrives. And in medieval Europe, adulthood tends to arrive carrying a schedule. By the time you reach the age of 7, your childhood is already considered dangerously complete. Modern 7-year-olds might be learning multiplication tables or arguing about bedtime. You, meanwhile, are about to leave home and begin your formal training for knighthood. Medieval society looks at a 7-year-old and thinks, yes, this seems old enough to begin preparing for warfare. One morning, your parents inform you that you will be sent to the household of another noble lord. This is presented as a great honour. Curiously, nobody asks your opinion, The journey itself feels enormous. The familiar walls of your home disappear behind you as wagons, horses, and attendants travel along muddy roads toward your new residence. You may only be travelling a few dozen miles, but to a child who has rarely left his local area, it feels like crossing an entire continent. When you arrive, everything seems larger, busier, and more intimidating. The Lord's household contains dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. Servants rush through corridors, guards patrol gates, horses fill the stables, important visitors arrive unexpectedly. Somewhere in this organised chaos you are expected to find your place. You are now a page. The title sounds impressive. The reality is somewhat less glamorous. Your duties include carrying messages, serving food at meals, helping guests, cleaning equipment, assisting servants, and generally being useful whenever an adult points in your direction. You quickly discover that medieval training follows a simple principle. If a job needs doing, the youngest person nearby will probably do it. Much of your day revolves around observation. You watch how noblemen behave. You study proper manners. You learn who deserves respect and who should be avoided. Medieval courts are filled with politics, rivalries, and hidden tensions. At 7 years old, you understand very little of it, which may actually be your greatest advantage. Mistakes happen frequently. You spill drinks, you forget instructions, you address the wrong person incorrectly. Every mistake brings correction, usually from someone who believes volume is an effective teaching method. Yet despite the challenges, your world begins to expand. You meet experienced warriors. You hear stories from travelling knights. You see fine armour, magnificent horses, and expensive weapons up close for the first time. For the first time, knighthood starts to feel real, not because you're holding a sword, but because you're carrying one behind somebody who already has one. It's a small step toward becoming a knight, a very small step, usually taken while carrying something heavy. As the months pass, your duties as a page become easier. You no longer get lost in the castle corridors quite as often. You have learned most people's names. You can carry a tray without dropping it. Usually. Now your education begins to focus on something every future knight is expected to master: courtly manners. This may sound disappointing. You dreamed about swords, horses, and heroic battles. Instead, adults are teaching you how to stand correctly at dinner. Yet in medieval society, manners are nearly as important as fighting skills. A knight represents his lord wherever he goes. He might attend feasts, negotiations, weddings, religious ceremonies, or diplomatic meetings. One foolish comment could insult an important noble and create problems lasting years. In other words, medieval politics often depended on people pretending to like each other. Every day becomes a lesson in proper behaviour. You learn how to greet nobles. You learn when to speak and when to remain silent. You learn where to sit at a feast and which guests deserve special attention. You learn how to serve wine correctly. You learn how to bow. You learn how to avoid staring at powerful people like an amazed farm animal. Some lessons seem endless. At meals, every movement is observed. Do not chew loudly. Do not grab food before your betters. Do not wipe your hands on the tablecloth. Do not start eating before the Lord does. The list continues for what feels like several centuries. You also begin studying conversation. Noble society values wit, charm, and intelligence. A future knight must be able to speak confidently with lords, ladies, church officials, and visiting dignitaries. Unfortunately, confidence takes practice. The first time an important guest asks you a question, your carefully prepared answer may vanish entirely from your mind. You stand there silently. The guest stares. You stare back. A nearby servant eventually rescues the situation. The memory will continue haunting you for many years. Yet slowly, you improve. You learn how people gain influence at court. You notice which nobles command respect when they enter a room. You observe how alliances form during conversations and feasts. You discover that power does not always belong to the strongest warrior. Sometimes it belongs to the person who can convince everyone else to agree with him. This realization is both fascinating and disappointing. After all, learning swordsmanship sounds much more exciting than learning politics. Unfortunately, many medieval knights eventually discover that surviving court can be far more difficult than surviving battle. At least on a battlefield, people are usually honest about trying to defeat you. By now, you have spent years learning manners, serving nobles, and navigating the complicated social ecosystem of castle life. You know how to behave at a feast. You know how to carry messages. You know which nobles are generous, and which ones seem permanently offended by the existence of other human beings. At last, your education begins focusing on the part you have been waiting for. Weapons. The adults finally decide that you are old enough to start learning how to fight. Not with real swords, of course. Nobody wants to explain to your parents how their future knight accidentally removed his own fingers during training. Instead, you begin with wooden weapons. Every morning, training starts early, very early. Medieval people had a remarkable ability to wake up before sunrise and immediately begin making life difficult for children. Under the supervision of experienced warriors, you learn the fundamentals of combat. How to stand, how to move, how to hold a weapon properly, how not to fall over while attempting any of the previous 3 tasks. The last lesson proves especially challenging. At first you are terrible. Everyone is. Your strikes are slow. Your balance is poor. Your footwork resembles a confused goose crossing a frozen pond. The older boys find this hilarious. A few years earlier, they looked exactly the same. They have conveniently forgotten this fact. Training sessions are exhausting. You run. You wrestle. You practice with wooden swords. You strengthen your arms and legs. You repeat the same movements hundreds of times until they become instinctive. Whenever you think you are improving, an experienced instructor effortlessly defeats you in seconds. This becomes a recurring theme. Horseback riding also becomes a major part of your education. A knight without a horse is like a ship without a sail. Technically possible, but nobody is going to be impressed. You spend countless hours learning to ride, guide, and control horses. Some horses cooperate willingly. Others appear to have dedicated their lives to testing your patience. One particularly stubborn horse seems to view every lesson as a negotiation. The horse wins most of them. As the months pass, your confidence grows. You begin participating in mock battles against other pages. Wooden swords clash. Boys charge across training fields imagining themselves as legendary warriors. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes you trip over your own feet before either can happen. Yet something important is changing. The child who arrived carrying trays and messages is slowly becoming stronger, faster, and more disciplined. Knighthood still lies years ahead, but for the first time, you can almost see it on the horizon. Right before an instructor orders you to run another lap around the courtyard. Around the age of 14, your life changes once again. After years of service as a page, countless lessons in manners, and enough weapons training to leave every muscle sore, you finally receive a promotion. You become a squire. This sounds extremely impressive, and it is, for approximately 5 minutes. Then someone hands you a long list of responsibilities. Unlike a page, who serves an entire household, a squire serves one specific knight. From this point forward, much of your life revolves around that individual. His schedule becomes your schedule. His problems become your problems. His horse occasionally becomes your problem as well. Your knight is a veteran warrior with years of experience. He has fought in battles, attended tournaments, negotiated disputes, and accumulated enough scars to make every story sound believable. Your job is to learn everything you can from him. You begin each morning before sunrise. While most sensible people are still asleep, you are already helping prepare equipment for the day. Armour must be cleaned and inspected. Weapons must be maintained. Horses must be groomed and fed. The amount of time required to maintain a knight's equipment is astonishing. The songs about knighthood rarely mention polishing rust. They should. A surprising amount of medieval warfare depends upon someone remembering to oil metal. You also assist your knight whenever he travels. Whether attending tournaments, hunting trips, military inspections, or visits to neighbouring lords, you accompany him everywhere. At first, carrying equipment seems manageable. Then you discover how much equipment a knight actually owns. Armour pieces, weapons, shields, spare weapons, extra clothing, personal belongings, items that appear completely unnecessary but somehow remain essential. By the end of some journeys, you feel less like an apprentice warrior and more like a heavily burdened pack mule. Yet this stage of your education teaches lessons impossible to learn in a classroom. You observe how experienced knights behave. You watch your master negotiate with nobles. You see how he commands soldiers. You witness disagreements, alliances and rivalries that shape the political world around you. Most importantly, you begin training with real weapons more frequently. The instructors become tougher. The expectations become higher. Mistakes that once earned laughter now earn criticism. Nobody expects perfection, but everyone expects improvement. Slowly, you begin earning respect. Not because of your family name, not because of your future potential, but because of your work. For the first time, people stop seeing you as a child preparing to become a knight. They start seeing you as a young warrior already on the path. The destination remains years away, but the road ahead finally feels real. As a squire, your education moves beyond practice yards and training fields. You are no longer simply learning how to become a knight. You are living beside one. Every day provides a front row seat to the realities of medieval knighthood, and the experience is far less glamorous than the song suggested. The minstrels always sing about the charge into battle. They rarely sing about the 6 hours spent waiting beforehand. Your knight takes you everywhere. You accompany him to tournaments, hunts, feasts, military musters, and diplomatic meetings. Whenever he travels, you travel. Whenever he stops, you stop. Whenever he decides to ride across 20 muddy miles of countryside because someone sent an urgent message, you ride across 20 muddy miles of countryside as well. This arrangement feels much less romantic during rainstorms. You begin learning the true responsibilities of knighthood. A knight is not simply a warrior. He is also a landowner, administrator, diplomat, judge, military leader, and occasionally a reluctant babysitter for quarrelsome nobles. Many disputes never reach a battlefield. Instead, they unfold through endless negotiations, agreements, and arguments. You watch your master settle disagreements over land boundaries, inheritance claims, hunting rights, and livestock. An astonishing number of medieval conflicts begin because two grown men cannot agree on where a field ends. At the same time, your combat training becomes more serious. Your knight personally supervises some of your lessons. He teaches techniques that no instructor in the training yard can fully explain. How to stay calm under pressure. How to recognize danger before it develops. How to read an opponent's intentions. How to survive when a carefully prepared plan immediately falls apart. According to your master, the last skill is particularly important. You begin practicing with heavier weapons and stronger opponents. Bruises become common. Cuts appear occasionally. Every mistake carries consequences. The lessons are painful, which usually means they are memorable. You also learn that courage looks very different up close. As a child, you imagined brave knights feeling no fear. The reality surprises you. Before dangerous hunts, difficult tournaments, or military expeditions, even experienced warriors feel nervous. The difference is that they continue anyway. This realization changes everything. For the first time, the knights around you stop seeming like legendary heroes from stories. They become human beings, skilled, experienced, respected, but still human. And as you watch your master navigate victories, failures, responsibilities, and risks, you begin understanding what knighthood truly means. It is not about wearing armour. It is about carrying responsibility. The armour merely makes that responsibility considerably heavier. For years, battle has existed only in stories. You have heard veterans describe famous victories beside roaring fireplaces. You have listened to minstrels sing of glorious charges and heroic last stands. You have spent countless hours training with swords, shields, and horses, imagining the day when you would finally test yourself against a real enemy. Now that day has arrived. And suddenly it seems like a terrible idea. The campaign begins with weeks of marching. Armies move slowly across the countryside, dragging supplies, animals, servants, and soldiers behind them. What seemed exciting at the start quickly becomes repetitive. You march, you eat, you sleep, you march again. Occasionally it rains. This somehow makes everything worse. Then one morning, word spreads through the camp. The enemy has been found. Almost instantly the atmosphere changes. The joking stops. The laughter becomes quieter. Even the most experienced soldiers seem more serious. As a squire, you help prepare your knight for battle. You check straps, buckles, weapons, and armour. Every piece must function perfectly. A loose strap that seems unimportant today could become fatal in an hour. Your knight notices your nervousness. You should be nervous, he tells you. This is not the comforting speech you were hoping for. Soon, the army forms ranks. Banners wave above hundreds of soldiers. Horses snort and paw at the ground. Priests move among the men offering blessings. Some soldiers pray quietly. Others stare toward the horizon. Everyone waits. Waiting, you discover, may be the hardest part. The battle finally begins with distant shouting, then horns, then movement. What follows bears little resemblance to the stories. There is noise everywhere. Metal crashes against metal. Men yell orders that disappear into the chaos. Horses charge through clouds of dust. You struggle to understand what is happening around you. The battlefield feels less like a carefully planned contest, and more like a giant argument involving several thousand armed participants. Your job is to remain close to your knight. You carry spare weapons. You relay messages. You help however you can. Several times, fear threatens to overwhelm you. Yet training takes over. One task leads to another. One moment leads to the next. Gradually, survival becomes more important than fear. Hours later, the fighting finally ends. The battlefield grows quiet, too quiet. Looking around, you see the true cost of war for the first time. The songs never prepared you for this part. As the sun begins to set, one thing becomes clear. This morning, you were a boy dreaming about battle. Tonight, you understand why veterans rarely talk about glory first. They usually talk about survival. Your first battle changes something inside you. Not in the dramatic way the stories describe. There is no sudden transformation. No moment where thunder crashes overhead and everyone recognizes that a great warrior has emerged. Instead, you simply return from the campaign a little older than when you left, a little quieter, and considerably less excited about being stabbed. The months that follow are filled with more training, more responsibilities, and more opportunities to prove yourself. Your knight watches carefully. So do other nobles. They are no longer judging whether you have potential. They are deciding whether you are ready. By now you can ride confidently, fight competently, and manage the countless responsibilities expected of a squire. You have served faithfully. You have accompanied your master through danger. Most importantly, you have demonstrated reliability. Medieval society values many virtues. Reliability ranks surprisingly high on the list. Eventually, the day arrives. You are to be knighted. The announcement spreads quickly through the household. Servants congratulate you. Fellow squires offer congratulations mixed with envy. Older knights nod approvingly. For years, this moment has been your goal. Now that it is finally here, you discover a new problem. You are terrified. The ceremony begins with preparation and reflection. In some regions, future knights spend the night in prayer, contemplating the responsibilities they are about to accept. You attempt to contemplate noble ideals. Your mind instead keeps replaying every embarrassing mistake you have ever made. The next day, dressed in your finest clothing, you stand before nobles, clergy, and fellow warriors. The atmosphere is solemn. Oaths are spoken. Promises are made. You swear loyalty, courage, and service. Then comes the moment itself. A senior knight places a sword upon your shoulder. The ceremony is brief. The significance is enormous. Just like that, you are no longer a squire. You are a knight. For a few glorious moments, everything feels exactly as you imagined. You have achieved the dream of your childhood. You have joined the ranks of Europe's warrior elite. You have earned honor, status, and respect. Then reality arrives. You now need armor. Your own armor. You need horses. Your own horses. Weapons, servants, equipment, income, land, if possible. Suddenly you understand why older knights spend so much time discussing finances. A knight's equipment costs a fortune. A war horse alone can be worth more than many peasant families earn in years. Nobody mentioned this during the heroic stories. As celebrations continue around you, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Becoming a knight was the easy part. Now you actually have to live like one. Now that you are officially a knight, you imagine life will finally become easier. After all, you have spent years training, serving, fighting, and proving yourself. Surely the reward for all that effort is a life of comfort and prestige. The Middle Ages would like to disappoint you immediately. One of the great secrets of medieval society is that not all knights are wealthy. In fact, many are surprisingly poor. You possess the title. You possess the armor. You possess the responsibilities. Unfortunately, you do not necessarily possess the money. Maintaining the appearance of a knight is astonishingly expensive. Your armor requires repairs. Your weapons need maintenance. After years of uncertainty, Fortune finally begins to favour you. Perhaps a loyal lord rewards your service. Perhaps you inherit property from a relative. Perhaps a successful marriage brings additional land into your possession. However it happens, you eventually achieve what many knights spend their entire lives pursuing: land. At first, the achievement feels magnificent. You ride across your estate imagining yourself as a powerful lord. Fields stretch across the landscape. Villagers work the land. Small streams wind through forests under your authority. For the first time, you possess something that can generate wealth rather than simply consume it. This feeling lasts until people start bringing you problems. A great many problems. It turns out that owning land means managing everything on it. Peasants argue over property boundaries. Tenants dispute rents. Livestock wander into neighbouring fields. Mills break. Bridges need repairs. Somebody's cow disappears. Another person's pig appears where it should not. For reasons no one fully understands, medieval society seems permanently one missing pig away from a major crisis. As the lord of the estate, everyone expects you to resolve these issues. You quickly learn that ruling land requires skills very different from fighting battles. A sword is remarkably ineffective at settling arguments about grazing rights, at least most of the time. Your days become filled with administration. You inspect crops, collect rents, oversee repairs, and hold local courts where disputes are heard and judgments delivered. The villagers look to you for leadership. The king expects taxes. The church expects donations. Your tenants expect protection. Everyone seems to expect something. Nobody appears interested in reducing your workload. Yet despite the frustrations, there is satisfaction in the role. For the first time, your success is measured by more than victories in battle. A well-managed estate grows wealthier. Fields become more productive. Roads improve. Families prosper. Your decisions shape hundreds of lives. This responsibility changes you. The young knight who dreamed only of tournaments and glory slowly becomes a leader. You begin understanding why older knights spent so much time discussing harvests, rents and trade. These things keep armies fed. They keep castles maintained. They keep kingdoms functioning. A prosperous estate can accomplish more than 100 heroic charges. Of course, not everything runs smoothly. Bad weather can ruin harvests. Disease can spread among livestock. Unexpected taxes can create hardship. Some years feel like an endless struggle against forces beyond your control. But such is the life of a landed knight. You still carry a sword. You still train for war. Yet increasingly, your greatest battles are fought not on blood-soaked fields, but across account books, harvest reports and meetings about missing pigs. History remembers the battles. Your peasants remember who fixed the bridge. As your reputation grows, so does your confidence. You have survived battles. You have managed land. You have earned the respect of your peers. Yet among knights, there remains one of the fastest ways to gain fame, fortune, and admiration: tournaments. To the outside world, tournaments appear glamorous. Colourful banners flutter in the wind. Nobles gather from across the region. Musicians play. Merchants sell food and goods. Crowds cheer as armoured riders thunder across the lists. It resembles a festival, a very dangerous festival. For knights, tournaments offer opportunities that real warfare often cannot. Victory brings prize money, valuable equipment, prestige, and sometimes powerful connections. A successful tournament knight can become famous throughout an entire kingdom. Naturally, this means everyone wants to win. You arrive at your first major tournament filled with confidence. This confidence lasts until you see the competition. Veteran knights from distant lands have gathered here. Some have spent years competing. Their armour is magnificent. Their horses are expensive. Their reputations arrive several minutes before they do. Suddenly, your chances seem slightly less certain. The tournament begins with ceremonies, feasts, and introductions. Noble families mingle, alliances form, rivalries quietly emerge. Then the competitions begin. The most famous event is the joust. Mounted knights lower their lances and charge directly toward one another at frightening speeds. The objective sounds simple: hit the other knight. Avoid being hit yourself. Reality proves more complicated. The first time you participate, your heart pounds louder than the crowd. Your horse surges forward beneath you. The opposing knight grows larger with every passing second. Then comes impact. The force feels like being struck by a collapsing building. One moment you are charging proudly. The next, you are staring at the sky while questioning several life choices. The crowd loves it. Fortunately, tournaments involve more than jousting. Melees allow groups of knights to engage in large mock battles. Swordsmanship competitions test skill. Archery contests draw spectators. Over time, you improve. Experience replaces nervousness. Victories begin accumulating. People start recognizing your name. Young squires watch you with admiration. Merchants greet you enthusiastically. Bards occasionally mention your accomplishments, usually with a few exaggerations added for dramatic effect. Success in tournaments brings wealth as well. Prize money helps maintain your estate. Captured equipment can be sold. Powerful patrons begin taking notice. For the first time, fame becomes part of your life. Yet every tournament also carries risk. Broken bones, concussions, serious injuries, occasionally worse. The cheering crowd sees glory. The castle physician sees steady employment. Such is the life of a tournament knight. Half athlete, half warrior, and entirely committed to charging toward danger for the entertainment of strangers. Years pass, and your reputation continues to grow. You are no longer the nervous young knight trying to prove himself at every opportunity. Your victories in battle and tournaments have earned respect. Your estate is stable. Other warriors know your name. Then comes another promotion, one that carries far more responsibility than glory. You become a banner knight. Unlike ordinary knights who fight under another lord's banner, a banner knight has the right to carry his own. This may sound like a small distinction. It is not. A banner means men now follow you. Real men. Armed men. Men with families, ambitions, fears, and a remarkable tendency to ask questions right when you are least prepared to answer them. For the first time, you command your own force of soldiers and lesser knights. Your colourful square banner flies above your position on the battlefield, allowing your followers to identify where they should gather. This is a tremendous honour. It is also a giant sign announcing exactly where enemy soldiers should aim. Leadership quickly changes the way you view warfare. As a young knight, your primary concern was survival. Now you must think about dozens, perhaps hundreds of other people. Food supplies, equipment, training, morale, pay, discipline. You discover that keeping soldiers organised is often harder than defeating enemies. A group of knights charging into battle may look impressive. Getting them all to arrive on time for inspection is another matter entirely. Campaigns become more complicated as well. Before, you simply followed orders. Now, you help create them. You attend councils with nobles and commanders. Maps are spread across tables. Plans are discussed late into the night. Some strategies sound brilliant. Others sound suspiciously like educated guesses delivered with confidence. You begin noticing that many military leaders spend a great deal of time pretending they know exactly what will happen next. History repeatedly proves otherwise. When battle finally comes, your role is different. You still fight. You still ride into danger. But now your eyes constantly search for your own banner and the men beneath it. Every loss feels personal. Every success belongs to the group rather than the individual. The responsibility weighs heavily upon you, far heavier than armor ever did. Yet there is satisfaction in leadership. The young page who once carried messages through castle corridors now commands warriors on the battlefield. The squire who polished another knight's armor now has knights serving beneath him. You have climbed another rung on the ladder of medieval society. And from this height, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The higher you rise, the less your success depends on your own sword, and the more it depends on everyone else's. By now, your life barely resembles the one you imagined as a child. Back then, knighthood seemed simple. Ride a horse, swing a sword, win glory. Instead, you have spent years managing land, commanding soldiers, attending councils, resolving disputes, and trying to prevent disasters before they happen. And because medieval life enjoys rewarding competence with additional work, you eventually rise even higher. You become a knight commander. This position places you among the most respected military leaders in your region. Lords seek your advice. Fellow knights listen when you speak. Young warriors hope to earn your approval. The promotion feels satisfying until you realize that every future failure will now be considered your fault. As a commander, warfare looks completely different. When you were younger, battles seemed straightforward. Two armies met, fought, and one side won. Now you understand what happens behind the scenes. Weeks before a campaign begins, preparations are already underway. Supplies must be gathered. Horses must be inspected. Weapons must be repaired. Messengers ride constantly between castles delivering orders. Entire armies depend upon logistics. This is disappointing news for anyone hoping history was more exciting. You spend long hours studying maps, roads, rivers, forests, fortifications. Every feature of the landscape matters. A poorly chosen route can leave soldiers exhausted before battle even begins. A badly positioned camp can invite disaster. You start noticing things you once ignored. How wide a bridge is. How quickly a river flows. How much grain a village can provide. The younger version of yourself would find this incredibly boring. The older version understands that these details determine whether armies survive. Military councils become a regular part of life. Around large wooden tables, nobles debate strategy deep into the night. Some commanders speak carefully, others speak loudly. A surprising number believe volume and wisdom are the same thing. You learn to distinguish between confidence and competence. The difference often saves lives. When campaigns begin, your responsibilities multiply. Thousands of men may depend upon your decisions. If supplies fail to arrive, soldiers go hungry. If scouts miss important information, armies can be ambushed. If your strategy fails, families across the kingdom may feel the consequences. The burden is immense, yet so is the respect. When you ride through camp, soldiers step aside. Young squires watch with admiration. Many see power. Few see the sleepless nights. Because leadership, you have discovered, is not the privilege of giving orders. It is the responsibility of living with the consequences when those orders are wrong. And that responsibility grows heavier with every victory, and even heavier with every defeat. After decades of service, campaigns, victories, defeats, and enough responsibility to fill several lifetimes, you reach a level few knights ever achieve. You become a knight of great renown. Your name is known far beyond your own lands. Nobles mention you during feasts. Travellers carry stories of your accomplishments from one region to another. Young squires speak about you the way you once spoke about legendary warriors from your childhood. The experience is strange, partly because many of the stories are wrong. A minor skirmish somehow becomes a heroic last stand. A successful negotiation becomes a tale of brilliant strategy. A lucky victory becomes evidence of genius. History, you discover, enjoys improving reality, whenever reality seems insufficiently dramatic. Still, the reputation brings undeniable advantages. Kings and powerful lords seek your counsel. Important guests visit your estate. Your opinions carry weight. When you speak during military councils, people listen. Sometimes they even stop interrupting. This may be your greatest achievement. You spend less time fighting personally and more time advising others. Younger knights seek guidance on leadership, warfare, and honour. They expect wisdom. Fortunately, you have accumulated plenty of experience. Unfortunately, much of that experience came from mistakes. The lessons that shaped you most were rarely your victories. They were the failures, the campaign that went wrong, the ally who proved unreliable, the battle won at terrible cost, the decision that seemed brilliant at the time and ridiculous afterward. Age has given you something valuable: perspective. When you were young, every challenge felt enormous. Every insult demanded a response. Every rival seemed important. Now you realize that many conflicts disappear if given enough time. Others were never worth fighting in the first place. This knowledge would have been incredibly useful 30 years earlier. Like many forms of wisdom, it arrives precisely when it is least needed. Your reputation continues to grow. Bards compose songs. Artists create portraits. Stories spread across the kingdom. Children hear your name around fireplaces and imagine a fearless warrior who never doubted himself. You almost feel sorry for them. Because you know the truth. Behind every famous knight stands a lifetime of uncertainty, errors, fears, and fortunate accidents. Yet, perhaps that is what makes the achievement meaningful. You were never perfect. No knight was. The legends simply leave out the difficult parts. As old companions fade away and a new generation rises, one thing becomes clear. You have become exactly what you once admired as a child. A living legend, though admittedly one with sore knees, old scars, and a growing appreciation for comfortable chairs. Eventually, a day arrives that no young knight ever thinks about. You grow old, not suddenly, not all at once. The process happens slowly, year after year, campaign after campaign, winter after winter. At first, you barely notice it. A shoulder takes longer to recover after training. An old injury aches when rain approaches. You need a little more time to climb into armour. Nothing serious, nothing worth mentioning. Then one morning, a young knight mounts his horse with effortless speed, and you realise you spent the last 30 seconds preparing for the exact same movement. Time, it seems, has been winning a battle you never noticed had started. Your body carries the evidence of a lifetime spent as a warrior. Scars cross your arms and chest. Old fractures occasionally remind you of their existence. Your knees complain during cold mornings. Your back has developed strong opinions about staircases. The songs never mention these things. The songs usually end right after the victory. Reality continues for several decades afterward. You no longer ride at the front of every charge. You no longer seek glory in tournaments. In fact, watching young knights launch themselves at each other with lances now feels less inspiring and more concerning. You find yourself thinking things such as, "That looks dangerous." This is generally considered one of the first signs of old age. Yet while your physical strength fades, something else grows stronger: your wisdom. Young squires now gather around you, eager to hear stories. They ask about famous battles, legendary warriors, great victories. You answer honestly. You tell them about courage, but you also tell them about fear. You tell them about leadership, but you also tell them about responsibility. You explain that knighthood was never truly about armour, horses, or fame. Those were merely the decorations. The real test was character. A knight's worth was measured not by how loudly people cheered his victories, but by how faithfully he carried his duties throughout his life. As the years pass, you spend more time managing your lands and advising younger generations. The kingdom slowly changes around you. New faces appear. Old friends disappear. Children grow into warriors. Warriors become leaders. Leaders become memories. And eventually you realize something remarkable. You have lived every level of medieval knighthood, from the small boy chasing dogs through castle courtyards, to the page carrying messages, to the squire serving a master, to the knight seeking glory, to the commander leading armies, and finally, to the old veteran looking back upon it all. The journey was harder than the stories promised, far more expensive than anyone admitted, and considerably muddier than the paintings suggest. Yet as you watch the next generation begin the path you once walked, you cannot help but smile, because despite everything, the danger, the sacrifices, the responsibilities, and the aching joints, you would probably do it all again. In the year 532, Constantinople smelled of smoke. For days, fire had swept through the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Crowds had rioted in the streets, buildings had collapsed, entire districts had been reduced to blackened ruins. Thousands were dead. Among the casualties was the city's great cathedral, burned and shattered during the chaos. Standing amid the destruction was Emperor Justinian. The emperor had survived the crisis, though only barely. At one point he had reportedly considered fleeing the city altogether. Fortunately for history, and perhaps unfortunately for the accountants who would later review the construction budget, he decided to stay. Now he faced a choice. He could rebuild the cathedral exactly as it had been before. It would be quicker, cheaper, and far less likely to cause headaches. Instead, Justinian chose the most ambitious option available. He wanted a church that would surpass every building on Earth. Not the largest church in Constantinople, not the largest church in the empire, the largest and most magnificent church the world had ever seen. It was the sort of goal that sounds impressive, until someone has to actually build it. Orders spread across the empire. Marble was collected from distant provinces. Ancient columns were brought from older temples and monuments. Skilled craftsmen travelled from Greece, Egypt, Syria, and Anatolia. Thousands of labourers arrived at the construction site. 2 brilliant scholars were placed in charge of the project, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus. Neither man was primarily famous as an architect. This might sound slightly concerning when constructing the most ambitious building of the age. Fortunately, both were extraordinary mathematicians and engineers. They approached the challenge differently from traditional builders. Instead of simply making a larger church, they envisioned something that seemed almost impossible. A vast dome suspended high above an enormous open interior. Many experts doubted the design could work. Some probably doubted it while quietly updating their wills. Yet construction began immediately. Day after day, workers hauled stone, brick, timber and marble through the streets of Constantinople. The site became a forest of scaffolding. Hammers echoed across the city from sunrise to sunset. Dust filled the air. Merchants, priests, senators, and ordinary citizens stopped to watch the strange new structure rise higher and higher. For nearly 6 years the project continued. Then, at last, the impossible stood completed. A building unlike anything humanity had ever seen. And soon, people from every corner of the known world would walk through its doors and stare upward in disbelief. The first thing you notice is not the cathedral itself. It is the city. 6th century Constantinople is one of the largest and wealthiest cities on earth. Hundreds of thousands of people crowd its streets. Ships fill its harbours. Merchants arrive from Egypt carrying grain, from Syria carrying spices, and from distant lands bringing goods that most citizens will never be wealthy enough to touch. The city never seems completely quiet. Donkeys pull carts loaded with supplies. Sailors shout along the docks. Traders advertise their goods with the confidence of men who believe their olives are the finest olives ever grown by human civilization. Everyone, somehow, has somewhere important to be. As you move through the city centre, however, the streets begin to feel different. People are travelling in the same direction. Pilgrims in simple wool clothing walk beside wealthy nobles wearing embroidered silk. Monks move quietly through the crowd. Soldiers stand watch near important intersections. Visitors from distant provinces glance around with wide eyes, trying not to look completely lost. Ahead of them all stands a building unlike anything they have ever seen. At first, only part of it is visible. A section of wall appears beyond the rooftops, then a curved roof, then another, and finally, the enormous dome rises above the city itself. Even from a distance, Hagia Sophia dominates the skyline. Most buildings in Constantinople seem to belong to the earth. Hagia Sophia appears to belong somewhere else entirely. As you draw closer, its scale becomes harder to comprehend. The walls seem impossibly high. Massive buttresses support structures that appear too large for ordinary stone and brick. Sunlight reflects from polished surfaces, making portions of the cathedral glow against the blue sky. The crowd around you slows. People naturally begin staring upward. Some visitors cross themselves. Others whisper prayers. Many simply stop walking for a moment. After all, there are very few opportunities in life to stand before the greatest building humanity has yet produced. The closer you get, the more details emerge. Marble columns frame entrances. Decorative carvings cover stone surfaces. Bronze fittings catch the sunlight. Imperial banners flutter in the breeze above nearby buildings. The cathedral is not hidden inside the city. The city seems arranged around the cathedral. For Emperor Justinian, this was exactly the point. Every visitor approaching Hagia Sophia should feel small, not humiliated, not frightened, simply reminded that they are standing at the centre of an empire that believes it has been chosen by God himself. And as you finally reach the great outer courtyard, one thing becomes obvious. The wonders inside may be even greater than the sight before you now. Before you can enter Hagia Sophia itself, you must first pass through the world that surrounds it. The cathedral does not simply rise from the streets of Constantinople. It sits within a vast complex of courtyards, gates, walkways, and gathering spaces that prepare visitors for what lies ahead. The transition is deliberate. The architects understood something important about human beings. If you show people the most magnificent room in the world immediately, they will be impressed. If you slowly build anticipation first, they will remember the experience for the rest of their lives. As you enter the outer courtyard, the noise of the city begins to soften, not disappear entirely. Constantinople is far too busy for that, but the shouting merchants, rattling carts, and harbour sounds fade into the background. In their place come quieter conversations, footsteps on stone, and the steady movement of worshippers arriving from every direction. The courtyard itself is enormous. Marble pathways cross open spaces where visitors gather before services. Decorative columns line portions of the complex. Fountains provide water for washing and refreshment. Clergy move between buildings dressed in dark robes, while officials carrying imperial business stride past with an urgency that suggests they are very important. Whether they actually are is another matter. Near one entrance stands a group of pilgrims. Their clothing is dusty from travel. Some have journeyed for weeks to reach Constantinople. Others have crossed seas and mountain ranges simply to see this church with their own eyes. They stare at the massive structure before them with expressions that mix exhaustion, excitement, and disbelief. For many, this may be the most extraordinary thing they ever witness. Elsewhere, wealthy aristocrats arrive accompanied by servants. Their silk garments catch the sunlight. Gold jewellery glitters on wrists and collars, yet even they seem diminished beside the cathedral towering above them. Hagia Sophia is one of the few places in the empire where a senator and a shepherd can stand side by side and feel equally insignificant. The building has that effect on people. As you continue forward, guards watch from strategic positions. This is a sacred place, but it is also deeply connected to imperial power. The emperor himself worships here. Major ceremonies are held here. Victories are celebrated here. Religion and government are woven together as tightly as threads in a Byzantine tapestry. Then you reach the inner gates. Beyond them stands the final approach. The towering bronze doors of the cathedral wait ahead. Incense drifts faintly through the air. The crowd grows quieter, and for the first time, you begin to sense that stepping inside Hagia Sophia may feel less like entering a building, and more like crossing into another world. The final approach to Hagia Sophia feels strangely quiet. Not silent, of course. Hundreds of people surround you. Sandals scrape across stone. Priests exchange greetings. Children whisper questions to their parents. Somewhere nearby, a fountain trickles steadily into a marble basin. Yet compared to the chaos of Constantinople outside, the atmosphere feels almost calm. The great bronze doors stand ahead. They are immense, not merely large enough to impress visitors, but large enough to make them feel as though they are entering a place designed for beings greater than themselves. And perhaps that is exactly the intention. The crowd moves slowly toward the entrance. Nobody rushes, partly because there are too many people, partly because something about the building encourages patience. As you draw closer, details emerge. The bronze surfaces gleam in the daylight. Massive hinges support their tremendous weight. Marble surrounds the doorway, polished so smoothly that it reflects faint traces of light. Generations of visitors have passed through here. Emperors, patriarchs, generals, merchants, pilgrims, ordinary citizens carrying worries that history would never bother recording. Yet all of them cross the same threshold. As you step forward, the sunlight behind you begins to fade. The temperature changes almost immediately. Outside, the summer heat presses against the city. Inside, cool air settles around you. The thick walls keep much of the heat at bay, creating a welcome relief for visitors who have spent hours walking through crowded streets. The smell changes as well. Gone are the scents of horses, cooking fires, sea salt, and busy markets. In their place comes incense. Not a little incense, an astonishing amount of incense. The Byzantine clergy take their aromatic responsibilities very seriously. Sweet fragrances drift through the air from censers carried during services. The scent lingers in the stone itself, creating an atmosphere unlike any ordinary building. Your eyes need a moment to adjust. The entrance halls are dim compared to the bright courtyard outside. Light filters through windows high above, creating patches of gold across the marble floors. Candles flicker in the distance. Shadows move softly along the walls as worshippers pass through the corridors. Ahead, you can hear faint echoes, voices, footsteps, the distant murmur of prayers. Every sound seems larger inside these walls. The architects understood acoustics almost as well as they understood stone. And then, as you continue through the final passageway, the corridor begins to open. The space ahead grows brighter. The ceiling rises. The sounds become richer. You take a few more steps, and suddenly, the full interior of Hagia Sophia reveals itself before your eyes. For a moment, you forget to breathe. Nearly everyone who enters Hagia Sophia experiences the same reaction. The passageway behind you suddenly feels small and distant. The courtyard is forgotten. The city beyond the walls disappears from your mind entirely. All attention is pulled upward. Far above your head floats the great dome. Or at least, it appears to float. The reality is far more complicated. The architects used some of the most advanced engineering of the ancient world to support this enormous structure. Massive arches distribute its weight. Hidden supports carry impossible loads. Thousands upon thousands of bricks work together to keep the dome standing. But standing beneath it, none of that is obvious. Instead, it looks like a golden sky suspended in mid-air. A ring of windows circles the dome's base. Sunlight pours through them from every direction. The light breaks apart as it enters, creating a glowing halo that surrounds the entire structure. The effect is astonishing. The dome seems detached from the building beneath it. Many visitors believe they are witnessing a miracle. Some later describe the sight as if heaven itself has descended into the church. Others struggle to find words at all. You can hardly blame them. The dome rises more than 180 feet above the floor. To a 6th century visitor, this is not merely architecture. It is a challenge to everything they thought humans were capable of building. As sunlight shifts throughout the day, the interior changes constantly. Golden mosaics shimmer overhead. Marble walls reflect scattered beams of light. Columns cast long shadows that slowly move across the floor. Nothing remains entirely still. The church feels alive. Beneath the dome, hundreds of people move quietly through the vast space. Some pray, some stare upward, some simply stand in silence, overwhelmed by the scale of what surrounds them. Even conversations seem different here. Every whisper travels, every footstep echoes. The architects designed the building so sound rolls through the interior like gentle waves. A single voice can carry surprising distances. During services, this acoustic power becomes extraordinary. But even now, with ordinary visitors walking through the nave, the cathedral feels filled with invisible movement. Light moves. Sound moves. Incense drifts through the air in pale clouds. And above it all hangs the dome. According to later tradition, Emperor Justinian entered the completed church and gazed upward in triumph. Legend says he exclaimed, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." Whether he actually spoke those words remains uncertain. What is certain is this. Standing beneath Hagia Sophia's dome, surrounded by light and gold, it becomes easy to understand why someone might believe they had built the greatest church on earth. The first thing you see is light, not the dome, not the marble, not the crowds gathered below. The light. It pours through dozens of windows high above, spilling into the vast interior in golden streams. After the dim entrance corridors, the brightness almost feels overwhelming. For a moment, your eyes struggle to understand what they are looking at. Then you look upward, and suddenly, everything else disappears. Above you hangs the great dome of Hagia Sophia. It is so enormous that your mind initially refuses to accept its size. The ceiling rises far beyond anything most people in the 6th century have ever seen. Houses, palaces, bathhouses, and ordinary churches seem insignificant compared to what stretches overhead. The remarkable thing is that the dome does not appear heavy. It should. Thousands of tons of brick and mortar are suspended above your head. Logic suggests it should look massive and solid. Instead, it appears almost weightless. The ring of windows at its base allows sunlight to flood underneath it, creating the illusion that the entire structure floats above the church rather than resting upon it. Visitors often stop walking. Many simply stare. Others point upward while speaking in hushed voices. Some cross themselves repeatedly. A few stand completely motionless, as if worried the vision might disappear if they blink. The architects, Anthemius and Isidore, could not have asked for a better reaction. Every part of the design was intended to create awe. And it works. The dome dominates everything beneath it. The columns seem smaller. The walls seem farther away. Even the crowds gathered inside appear tiny against the vastness above. Around the church, polished marble reflects the incoming sunlight. The walls shimmer with colours brought from every corner of the empire. Green stone from Greece, purple stone from Egypt, white marble from distant quarries. The entire building feels less like a church and more like an attempt to gather the wealth of the known world beneath a single roof. Then there are the mosaics. Gold glitters everywhere. Tiny pieces of glass catch the sunlight and scatter it across the interior. As visitors move through the nave, the reflections shift constantly, making the church seem alive. Nothing remains still. Light moves, shadows move, incense drifts slowly through the air, and above it all hangs the dome. For many visitors, this is the moment they remember forever. Not the journey to Constantinople, not the crowded streets outside, not even the emperor who ordered the church built. They remember looking upward and feeling, if only for a moment, that they were standing somewhere between earth and heaven itself. Visitors finally emerge into the nave and look upward. For a brief moment, many simply stop walking. The courtyard, the bronze doors, the long approach through Constantinople, all of it vanishes from their thoughts. Only one thing remains: the dome. It rises high above the floor, dominating every inch of the interior. No matter where you stand, your eyes are drawn toward it. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. Most people entering Hagia Sophia have never seen a building remotely this large. Even those accustomed to imperial palaces and grand churches find themselves staring upward in disbelief. The dome appears impossible. Not because it is large, because it does not seem to behave like a dome at all. Massive structures are supposed to look heavy. They are supposed to remind you of the enormous weight pressing downward. Yet Hagia Sophia's great dome seems strangely weightless. A ring of windows circles its base. Sunlight pours through them from every direction. The light separates the dome visually from the supports beneath it, creating an illusion that leaves visitors speechless. Rather than appearing attached to the building, the dome seems suspended above it, floating. The effect is so powerful that many observers later struggle to describe what they have seen. Some compare it to the heavens. Others claim the dome hangs from a golden chain descending from the sky. A few are convinced divine assistance must have been involved somewhere during construction. After all, giant floating ceilings are not usually associated with ordinary building projects. The sunlight changes constantly throughout the day. As clouds pass overhead, the brightness inside shifts and moves across the marble floors. Golden mosaics catch the light and scatter it throughout the church. Reflections shimmer across columns and walls. Nothing remains still. The entire cathedral seems alive. Below the dome, visitors wander through the vast open space. Pilgrims whisper prayers. Merchants stare upward. Children point excitedly toward the ceiling. Even wealthy nobles who spend their lives surrounded by luxury appear humbled by what they see. For a few moments, social rank matters very little. Everyone becomes simply another person staring at the impossible. The architects had achieved exactly what Emperor Justinian wanted. This was not merely a church, it was a statement, a declaration that Constantinople stood at the centre of the Christian world. A monument to imperial power, divine favour, and human ingenuity. And as the light continues to stream through the windows high above, illuminating the floating dome with an almost supernatural glow, it becomes easy to understand why many 6th century visitors left Hagia Sophia convinced they had witnessed something beyond human creation. After the initial shock of seeing the dome, another wonder slowly begins to reveal itself. At first, you barely notice it. Yes, a priest speaks somewhere in the distance. A group of worshippers quietly recites prayers. Footsteps echo across the marble floor. Then you realize something unusual. The building sounds different. Every noise seems larger than it should be. Every voice travels farther than expected. The immense interior of Hagia Sophia transforms sound into something almost physical. Words drift through the air long after they are spoken. Echoes roll beneath the dome and return from distant corners of the church. Even the smallest whisper seems capable of reaching places it has no business reaching. Visitors often pause and listen. The architecture is not merely meant to be seen, it is meant to be heard. As more people enter the cathedral, the sounds begin to merge together. Prayers overlap. Conversations blend into a low murmur. The rustling of robes mixes with the soft crackling of candles. Above it all hangs a constant, gentle echo that fills the vast space without ever becoming overwhelming. The effect is strangely calming. You feel surrounded by sound without being assaulted by it. Then the service begins. Clergy emerge from side chambers dressed in magnificent robes. Golden threads shimmer as they move through shafts of sunlight. Incense bearers swing censers that release clouds of fragrant smoke into the air. The congregation gradually grows quiet. Anticipation spreads through the crowd. Then the chanting starts. One voice begins, then another joins. Soon, an entire choir is singing beneath the dome. The sound rises upward and spreads through the cathedral like a wave. It bounces from marble walls. It circles beneath the ceiling. It fills every corner of the building. Visitors who have never experienced Byzantine worship often find themselves overwhelmed, not necessarily by the words. Many foreign pilgrims do not even understand Greek, but understanding the language almost becomes unnecessary. The music itself carries the emotion, deep, powerful, and hauntingly beautiful. The chants transform the cathedral into something that feels less like a building and more like a living instrument. Some worshippers close their eyes, others look upward toward the dome. A few quietly weep. For them, this is more than a religious service. It is an encounter with the divine. Emperor Justinian's architects had created a space where light, sound, and architecture work together to inspire awe. The dome captures the eyes. The chanting captures the ears. And together, they create an experience unlike anything else in the 6th century world. For many visitors, this is the moment when Hagia Sophia truly becomes unforgettable. Most visitors who enter Hagia Sophia come to witness the greatest church in the world. But on certain days, they witness something else. The emperor. Long before he arrives, people know something important is happening. Guards take their positions. Officials move through the cathedral with unusual urgency. Members of the clergy prepare carefully for the ceremony ahead. The atmosphere changes. Not tense, not fearful, expectant. In the Byzantine Empire, the emperor is more than a ruler. To many citizens, he is God's chosen representative on earth, entrusted with protecting both the empire and the Christian faith. And there is no place where that connection is displayed more clearly than inside Hagia Sophia. The congregation gathers beneath the great dome. Sunlight streams through the high windows. Incense drifts lazily through the air. The distant chanting of clergy echoes from the upper galleries. Then movement begins near one of the imperial entrances. Heads turn. Conversations stop. The emperor has arrived. Dressed in magnificent ceremonial robes, he enters surrounded by attendants, guards, and senior officials. Gold embroidery catches the light. Precious stones sparkle across his garments. Every detail is designed to project authority, wealth, and divine favour. Yet even the emperor appears small beneath the immense dome overhead. That is one of the most remarkable things about Hagia Sophia. The building dwarfs everyone. Pilgrims, patriarchs, generals, even emperors. Before he became a soldier, a governor, a hostage, a commander, or a symbol remembered centuries later, he was simply a boy growing up among the rugged mountains and valleys of Albania during the late 14th century. His world was small, not unimportant, just small. A collection of stone fortresses perched on hillsides, villages surrounded by vineyards and grazing fields, narrow roads winding through mountains that seemed determined to make travel as inconvenient as possible. For generations, Albanian noble families had ruled these lands through shifting alliances, local rivalries, and occasional arguments settled with swords rather than lengthy discussions. The boy belonged to one of these noble households. His father controlled territory, commanded warriors, and negotiated constantly with neighbouring lords. Every decision mattered. One wrong alliance could cost land. One wrong battle could cost everything. Politics in the Balkans was less a game of chess and more a game of juggling knives while standing on a moving horse. The boy did not fully understand this yet. His days were occupied with lessons more suitable for a future nobleman. He learned to ride horses across rocky terrain. He practiced with bows and wooden weapons. He listened as older men discussed warfare, diplomacy, and family honour. Like many noble sons, he was expected to become a leader someday. The exact details remained unclear. Surviving long enough to find out was usually the first requirement. Yet beyond the mountains, a new power was expanding. The Ottoman Empire. At first, the Ottomans seemed distant, a problem for other rulers, a concern for another year. Then, another fortress submitted. Another lord accepted Ottoman authority. Another region fell under their influence. Slowly, steadily, the empire pushed deeper into the Balkans. News travelled along trade routes and military roads. Stories arrived with merchants and travellers. Stories of vast armies, of disciplined soldiers, of sultans whose authority stretched across continents. The boy occasionally heard these conversations. He probably paid little attention. Children rarely spend their afternoons worrying about geopolitical transformations. There are horses to ride and far more important matters to consider. But his father paid attention. Every Albanian noble did, because the Ottoman advance was no longer a distant rumour. It was becoming a reality. The mountains that had protected generations of local rulers suddenly seemed less secure. The old world was changing, and although the boy could not yet see it, that change was moving directly toward him. Soon, Decisions made by emperors, sultans, and noblemen would reach his family's doorstep. And when they did, his childhood would come to an abrupt end. The change arrives quietly, not with an army, not with a battle, not with the dramatic thunder of thousands of soldiers marching through the mountains. Instead, it arrives on horseback. One morning, word spreads through the region that Ottoman officials are approaching. Almost immediately, people begin talking. Farmers discuss it in the fields. Merchants exchange rumours in marketplaces. Servants whisper about it in noble households. Nobody seems entirely certain what will happen. That uncertainty is often worse than certainty. The boy notices the change in mood long before he understands the reason for it. His father becomes more serious. Visitors arrive more frequently. Meetings last longer. Conversations stop whenever children enter the room. This is usually an excellent sign that adults are discussing something important. Or embarrassing. In this case, it is important. The Ottoman Empire now holds enormous influence throughout the Balkans. Many local rulers have accepted Ottoman authority in exchange for keeping their lands and titles. Others have resisted and paid a heavy price. The boy's family exists somewhere in between. Like many noble households, they are trying to survive in a world that is changing faster than anyone would like. Then the officials arrive. They are not conquerors in shining armour. They are administrators, men carrying records, instructions, and authority granted by distant rulers. Their arrival is orderly, professional, almost routine, which somehow makes the situation even more unsettling. Armies come and go. Administrators tend to stay. The visitors are welcomed into the noble residence. Food is served. Formal greetings are exchanged. Everyone behaves politely. Very politely. The sort of politeness that usually appears when nobody wishes to cause a problem. For several days, discussions continue. The boy sees men studying documents and exchanging information. Names are reviewed. Families are examined. Obligations are discussed. The adults understand what is happening. The children do not. At least not yet. Then comes the decision. The Ottoman authorities select the young Albanian noble boy for service within the Ottoman system. For the empire, this is an opportunity. Talented boys from noble and influential families can be educated, trained, and shaped into future administrators, soldiers, and commanders. For the family, the situation is far more complicated. Refusing is dangerous. Accepting is painful. The boy notices the reaction immediately. His mother grows quiet. His father spends long hours alone. Relatives begin visiting more often. Nobody explains everything directly. Nobody needs to. Children are remarkably skilled at recognizing when their lives are about to change. The boy does not yet know where he will go. He does not know what he will become. But for the first time, he understands one thing clearly. Soon, he will leave the mountains of Albania behind. And there is no guarantee he will ever return the same person. The days after the decision pass far too quickly. At first, the boy hopes something might change. Perhaps the officials will reconsider. Perhaps his father will find a way to negotiate. Perhaps another family will be chosen instead. Children are naturally optimistic when facing unpleasant realities. Unfortunately, empires are not. The preparations continue. Horses are readied. Travel supplies are gathered. Letters are written. Every passing day brings the departure closer. The boy begins noticing details he had never paid attention to before. The mountains surrounding his home, the narrow paths winding through forests, the sound of village bells echoing through the valleys. Even ordinary things suddenly seem important when there is a chance you may never see them again. His family tries to maintain a sense of normality. Meals continue, lessons continue, daily life continues, at least on the surface. Beneath it all, everyone understands what is happening. His mother watches him more carefully than before. His brothers spend more time at his side. His father becomes unusually patient, a sure sign that something serious is occurring. Fathers throughout history have often preferred practical advice to emotional speeches. The boy receives plenty of practical advice. Be disciplined. Learn quickly. Remember your family. Observe more than you speak. The sort of wisdom that sounds simple until life gives you a reason to need it. As departure day approaches, relatives arrive from nearby estates and villages. Some bring gifts, others offer blessings, a few simply come to say goodbye. The boy notices that many adults speak to him differently now, less like a child, more like someone about to enter a larger world. That realization is both exciting and terrifying. Then the morning arrives. The horses stand ready. The Ottoman escort waits. There are no grand ceremonies, no dramatic speeches. History often imagines major events as theatrical moments. In reality, life-changing events frequently begin with people quietly climbing onto horses and riding away. The boy embraces his family. His mother struggles to hide her tears. His father maintains his composure, though not easily. The mountains that had always seemed permanent suddenly feel fragile. Home itself feels fragile. One final look, one final farewell. Then the journey begins. The road winds away from the familiar valleys of Albania. At first he keeps looking back. The fortress grows smaller. The villages disappear behind distant hills. The landscape of his childhood slowly fades from view. Around him travel other boys headed toward uncertain futures. Some are frightened, some are curious. Most are both. As the caravan continues eastward, the boy begins to understand a difficult truth. He is not simply leaving home. He is leaving behind the life he was expected to live. Ahead lies a future that nobody, not even he, can yet imagine. The farther the caravan travels, the more unfamiliar the world becomes. At first, the mountains of Albania still surround the travellers. The roads remain rough. The villages still resemble those the boy has known all his life. But with each passing day, the landscape changes. The familiar disappears piece by piece. New languages replace old ones. Different customs emerge, different clothing, different foods, different faces. The Balkans are a crossroads of peoples, and the boy is now crossing through all of them. The journey is long enough for fear to slowly transform into curiosity, long enough for strangers to become companions, long enough for homesickness to settle quietly into the background. Among the travellers are other boys selected for service within the Ottoman system. Some come from Serbian lands, some from Bosnia, others from regions the boy has never even heard of. At first they speak little. Each carries his own worries. Each misses home. Each wonders what awaits them at the end of the road. But shared uncertainty has a way of creating friendships. Gradually, conversations begin. The boys exchange stories about their villages. They compare family traditions. They argue over whose homeland has the strongest warriors. This particular debate produces no winner, like most arguments involving teenage boys and national pride. As the weeks pass, the Ottoman escorts prove different from what the boy expected. They are strict, disciplined, professional. But they are not the monsters described in fearful village rumours. The Empire wants these boys educated and trained. Dead boys make very poor administrators. This practical reality provides some comfort. The caravan passes through towns bustling with merchants from distant lands. The boy sees goods he never imagined existed. silks from Asia, spices from Arabia, luxury items worth more than an entire village. For the first time, he begins to grasp the scale of the empire he is entering. His homeland suddenly feels very small, not insignificant, simply small. The Ottoman world stretches far beyond mountains and valleys. It reaches across seas, deserts, and continents. The realization is overwhelming. Then one evening, after weeks on the road, rumours begin spreading among the travellers. The capital is near, Constantinople, the city that serves as the heart of the empire, the city of emperors, sultans, palaces, and wonders. The boys have heard stories about it for years. Most seem impossible. Streets crowded with thousands, markets larger than entire towns, buildings so vast they appear unreal. Naturally, this only makes everyone more eager to see it. As the caravan continues its final approach, excitement begins replacing fear, because whatever lies ahead, one thing is certain. The next chapter of the boy's life will begin not in a mountain fortress of Albania, but in the greatest city he has ever imagined. After weeks of travel, the city finally appears. At first, it is only a distant shape on the horizon. Then the walls come into view. Massive, endless, almost unbelievable. The boy has seen fortresses before. Albania is full of them. Stone walls and defensive towers are familiar sights, but this is different. Constantinople is not a fortress. It is a world. Its enormous walls stretch across the landscape like a mountain built by human hands. Countless towers rise above them. Beyond the walls, domes and minarets pierce the skyline. Nothing in the boy's life has prepared him for this sight. As the caravan approaches the gates, the crowds become thicker. Merchants push carts loaded with goods. Sailors haul cargo from distant ports. Soldiers patrol the roads. Travellers from every corner of the empire move through the city. The boy hears languages he cannot identify: Greek, Turkish, Arabic, Persian, and many others. The city seems to contain half the world. When the caravan finally enters through the gates, the noise is overwhelming. Markets overflow with activity. Street vendors call out to customers. Craftsmen hammer metal in open workshops. Animals crowd the streets. The smell of spices, smoke, bread, livestock, and the sea mixes together into something impossible to describe. For a moment, the boy simply stares. Everything feels larger, louder, faster. His homeland suddenly seems very far away. The Ottoman officials lead the boys through districts filled with grand buildings. Palaces stand beside gardens. Mosques rise above crowded neighbourhoods. Government offices bustle with activity. Everywhere there is evidence of organisation. The empire is enormous, but it functions because thousands of administrators, soldiers, scholars and officials keep it running. Soon the boys are separated into groups. Their education is about to begin. This is the moment when the journey truly ends. Up until now, they have been travellers. Now they become students of the Ottoman system. The transition is immediate. New rules replace old habits. Schedules become strict. Discipline becomes essential. The boy quickly learns that talent alone is not enough. The empire values obedience, intelligence, and hard work. Every action is observed. Every mistake is noticed. Every success is remembered. For some boys, the adjustment is difficult. For others, it becomes an opportunity. The Albanian noble boy watches carefully. He listens more than he speaks. He studies everything around him. The lessons have already begun, because survival in this new world requires learning its rules. And as he settles into his new life, he starts to realize something unexpected. The empire that took him from his homeland is also preparing him for a future far greater than he could have imagined in the mountains of Albania. The education begins immediately. There is no long period of adjustment, no opportunity to spend weeks wandering the city or recovering from the journey. The Ottoman system has invested time and resources in bringing these boys to the capital. Now it expects results. Each day follows a strict routine. Lessons begin early. Rules are enforced consistently. Discipline governs everything. For the Albanian boy, the first challenge is language. Around him, instructors and officials speak Ottoman Turkish. Other students arrive from different regions of the empire, bringing their own languages and accents. At first, conversations feel like puzzles missing half their pieces. Simple tasks become difficult. Simple mistakes become common. But children learn quickly, especially when failure is not an attractive option. Within months, unfamiliar words begin to feel natural. The boy listens carefully, observes constantly, studies relentlessly. He discovers that success here depends less on noble birth and more on ability. That realization surprises him. Back in Albania, family connections and local influence mattered greatly. Inside the Ottoman system, talent can open doors that birth alone cannot. Not everyone appreciates this arrangement. Some students struggle with the demands, others long constantly for home. A few never fully adapt. The Albanian boy understands their feelings. There are nights when memories of mountain villages and family gatherings return with painful clarity. The smell of familiar food, the sound of local songs, the sight of hills rising above his homeland. Those memories never disappear, but they slowly become less immediate, less sharp. The present demands attention, and the present is full of opportunity. The curriculum is extensive. Students study languages, history, administration, military skills, religion, court etiquette. Everything needed to serve a vast empire. The expectations are enormous. Future governors may emerge from these classrooms, future generals, future advisors to the Sultan himself. The empire is searching for talent wherever it can find it. The boy begins to thrive. His instructors notice his intelligence, his discipline, his willingness to learn. Qualities that earn respect in any society. For the first time since leaving Albania, he starts imagining a future rather than merely enduring the present. The fear that dominated the journey begins to fade. In its place comes ambition. Careful ambition, the kind that grows quietly. Yet even as he masters new skills, a question lingers beneath the surface. Who is he becoming? The son of an Albanian noble family? A servant of the Ottoman Empire? Both? Neither? The answer is not yet clear. What is clear is that the boy who arrived at Constantinople is already changing. With every lesson learned and every year that passes, the distance between his old life and his new one grows larger, and soon the empire will begin testing just how far he can rise. Years pass. The frightened boy who once rode away from the mountains of Albania is becoming difficult to recognize. The empire has shaped him, not all at once, not through a single lesson or dramatic event, through countless small changes repeated day after day, new skills, new responsibilities, new expectations. The transformation is gradual, but it is undeniable. By now he speaks Ottoman Turkish fluently. He understands the customs of the court. He has mastered military training and administrative studies. More importantly, he has learned how power operates inside one of the largest empires in the world, and the Ottoman system rewards such abilities. Advancement is possible. For talented students, remarkable advancement. Unlike many noble societies where birth determines almost everything, The Ottoman administration actively searches for capable individuals. The empire needs governors, commanders, advisors, officials. It cannot afford to ignore talent. The Albanian youth quickly discovers that opportunities exist for those willing to seize them. His instructors continue to notice him. Superiors begin assigning greater responsibilities. Tasks that once seemed intimidating become routine. The confidence he lacked during his first months in Constantinople now comes naturally. He learns an important lesson. Knowledge creates power, not the power of armies, not the power of wealth, the power to influence decisions, to understand people, to navigate complicated situations, the sort of power that often lasts longer than swords. Around him, other students experience varying fortunes. Some excel, some struggle, some disappear into lesser roles throughout the empire. The competition is constant. Everyone understands what is at stake. A successful career can bring influence, prestige, and authority beyond anything imagined in childhood. Failure means becoming just another official among thousands. The Albanian youth refuses to fail. His ambition grows steadily. Yet that ambition creates a strange tension inside him. The more successful he becomes, the further he moves from the life he once knew. Memories of Albania still exist. The mountains, the villages, his family. But they increasingly feel like memories from another lifetime. Sometimes he catches himself thinking in Turkish rather than his native language. Sometimes he realizes months have passed without speaking about his homeland. These moments unsettle him, because they force him to confront a difficult reality. The Ottoman system is not merely educating him, it is reshaping his identity, and it is doing so successfully. By now, the empire no longer sees him as a boy taken from Albania. It sees something else. A promising young man with exceptional potential, a future servant of the state, perhaps even a future leader. The question is no longer whether he will succeed. The question is how much success the empire is willing to grant him. Success brings rewards. It also brings questions. By now, the young Albanian has achieved something few could have imagined when he first left home. He has risen through the ranks of the Ottoman system. Superiors trust him. Opportunities continue to appear. His future looks brighter than it ever could have in the isolated mountain territories of his childhood. Yet the higher he climbs, the more complicated his identity becomes. To the Ottoman authorities, he is a success story, proof that the system works. A talented young man transformed into a loyal servant of the empire. To many people in his homeland, however, the situation would appear very different. Some would see him as a son who never returned. Others might view him as a man serving foreign rulers. A few might consider him both. The truth is far more complicated than any simple label. The young man now lives in a world few Albanians of his generation could even imagine. He attends meetings with powerful officials. He learns about military campaigns taking place hundreds of miles away. He sees how governors administer provinces stretching across vast distances. The empire reveals itself not as a distant force, but as an enormous machine, with countless people working to keep it moving, and he is becoming one of them. Yet memories remain, sometimes unexpectedly. A familiar melody heard in a marketplace, a traveller speaking an Albanian dialect, a passing reference to the mountains where he grew up. Such moments can stop him in his tracks. For a brief instant, he is no longer an Ottoman official. He is a boy again, riding through valleys, listening to family stories, watching the sunset behind familiar peaks. Then the moment passes, duty returns, reality returns. The empire always demands attention. As the years continue, he learns to live with this contradiction. He belongs to two worlds. One gave him birth, The other gave him opportunity. Neither can be fully abandoned. Neither can be fully embraced without sacrifice. Many men in similar situations struggle with this balance. Some reject their past entirely. Others spend their lives longing for what they lost. The young Albanian chooses a different path. He accepts that both histories now belong to him. The mountains of Albania shaped his childhood. The Ottoman Empire shaped the man he has become. Together, they have created someone neither world could have produced alone. And as his reputation continues to grow, events beyond his control are beginning to reshape the Balkans once again. Soon, the land he left behind will produce a figure who challenges Ottoman power itself. A figure whose name will echo across centuries. And that development will force every Albanian serving the empire to confront an uncomfortable question about loyalty, identity, and home. The young Albanian who left his homeland years ago has become a man, an accomplished one, educated, respected, trusted by the Ottoman state. By almost every measure, the empire's investment has succeeded. The frightened boy who once rode eastward through the mountains is gone. The guests arrive expecting dinner. What they receive is something closer to a theatrical performance, a wealth exhibition, and a culinary prank all rolled into one. The feast takes place in ancient Rome, during an age when the wealthy competed with one another in increasingly creative ways to prove they had more money than common sense. And few men embraced this challenge more enthusiastically than Trimalchio. Now, Trimalchio was not a real historical figure in the traditional sense. He appears in the Roman work Satyricon, written by the author Petronius. Yet the character was clearly inspired by the excesses of wealthy Romans that audiences would have immediately recognized. In other words, the joke only worked because people knew men like this actually existed. The guests enter a lavish dining room decorated with expensive artwork, exotic ornaments, and enough luxury to make several senators quietly reconsider their career choices. Servants move everywhere. Musicians perform. Food arrives constantly, and the host ensures that every moment focuses attention on himself. The first courses immediately reveal what kind of evening this will be. Platters appear covered with elaborate decorations. Ordinary dishes are disguised as something else. Foods are hidden inside other foods. Eggs are served that turn out not to be eggs at all. Nothing is straightforward. Eating dinner has become an intellectual puzzle. One almost expects a roasted peacock to emerge carrying legal paperwork and demanding signatures. As the evening continues, the displays become increasingly extravagant. Exotic animals appear on the tables. Rare ingredients imported from distant provinces are presented as casually as bread. Entire courses arrive, accompanied by performances from servants and entertainers. The guests are expected not merely to eat, but to admire, and preferably to admire loudly. That is the entire point. In Roman elite society, a feast was never just about food. It was about status, power, influence. A wealthy host wanted guests to leave impressed, jealous, and slightly exhausted. Success was measured not by how well people ate, but by how much they talked about the feast afterward. Trimalchio understands this perfectly. Every course becomes larger. Every display becomes stranger. Every moment becomes more theatrical. The meal stretches on for hours. Guests drink wine, listen to speeches, and endure endless demonstrations of the host's wealth. Some are amazed. Some are entertained. Some are probably wondering whether they will ever be allowed to go home. Yet centuries later, people still remember the feast, and perhaps that was Trimalchio's greatest victory. The food disappeared, the wine was consumed, the decorations eventually vanished, but the spectacle itself became immortal. If Trimalchio's feast was about pretending to be important, the next banquet was hosted by a man who had actually conquered half the known world, and he wanted everyone to remember it. By the time Alexander the Great reached the height of his power, he ruled an empire stretching from Greece to the borders of India. Kingdoms had fallen before him, cities bore his name, entire nations paid tribute to his authority. Naturally, this seemed like an excellent excuse for a feast. One of the most famous celebrations took place after years of military victories had transformed a young Macedonian king into perhaps the most powerful man on earth. The setting was magnificent. Rich carpets covered palace floors. Golden vessels lined the banquet tables. Musicians, dancers, nobles, generals, and foreign ambassadors filled the halls. Every detail reminded guests that they were standing in the court of a conqueror whose ambitions seemed to have no limits. The food arrived in endless waves: roasted lamb, wild boar, game birds, fresh fish transported from distant regions, exotic fruits imported from across the empire, massive loaves of bread, honey cakes, spiced delicacies that most ordinary people would never taste in their entire lives. The tables groaned beneath the weight. The servants probably did as well. Wine flowed continuously, and not just ordinary wine. The Macedonians were famous for their drinking culture, and Alexander's court embraced the tradition enthusiastically, very enthusiastically. Banquets often involved drinking contests, endless toasts, and enough wine to make future historians question the judgment of nearly everyone involved. Alexander himself enjoyed these gatherings. The feast was more than entertainment. It was politics. Generals were rewarded. Alliances were strengthened. Foreign envoys witnessed the wealth and confidence of the empire. Every cup raised and every toast delivered carried political significance. Yet beneath the celebration, something else was emerging. Success. Too much success. The young king who had once led daring cavalry charges now lived surrounded by unimaginable luxury. Persian customs entered the court. Ceremonies became more elaborate. Some Macedonian veterans began worrying that their king was changing, perhaps even becoming too much like the rulers he had conquered. Still, on feast nights, those concerns often disappeared beneath mountains of food and rivers of wine. The music played. The guests laughed. The conqueror celebrated. And for a few hours, the empire seemed invincible. Yet history has a habit of ending celebrations abruptly. Many of Alexander's most famous banquets would later become associated not only with triumph, but with arguments, excess, and tragedy. Because sometimes the greatest dangers to an empire are not found on the battlefield. Sometimes they are seated at the banquet table. If Alexander's banquet celebrated conquest, the next feast celebrated something equally important to medieval rulers: marriage. Or more specifically, using marriage as an opportunity to display enough wealth to make neighbouring kingdoms deeply uncomfortable. The year is 1382. England's young king, Richard II, is marrying Anne of Bohemia. The union is politically important, linking England with powerful allies in Europe. But politics alone does not impress medieval nobles. For that, you need a feast. A very large feast, preferably one involving enough food to feed several villages. The celebrations begin long before the first dish reaches the table. Nobles travel from across England and beyond to attend. Great lords arrive with their retinues. Knights display expensive clothing. Church officials gather in ceremonial splendour. Everyone is watching everyone else. Medieval feasts were social battlefields disguised as dinner parties. Status mattered. Seating arrangements mattered. Who spoke to the king mattered. Even who received the best portion of food could become a matter of pride. As guests enter the great hall, they find a scene designed to overwhelm. Long tables stretch across the chamber. Colourful banners hang from the walls. Candles and torches illuminate polished silver and gold. Musicians perform, while servants move constantly between kitchens and dining areas. The scale alone is impressive. Then the food begins arriving. Course after course emerges from the royal kitchens: roasted beef, venison from royal forests, swans, peacocks, herons, geese, pies filled with meat, spices and dried fruits, fresh bread baked in enormous quantities, imported wines, sweet pastries, rich sauces flavoured with costly spices from distant lands. These spices are particularly important. Cinnamon, cloves, ginger and pepper are astonishingly expensive in medieval Europe. Using them generously is the culinary equivalent of scattering gold coins across the table. The message is clear. The king is wealthy enough not to care about the cost. Guests eat for hours. Entertainment fills the spaces between courses. Minstrels perform songs. Stories are recited. Jesters attempt to amuse noble audiences who are often much harder to entertain than they believe. Some succeed. Most do their best. Throughout the evening, Richard II sits at the centre of attention. The feast is not merely a wedding celebration. It is a demonstration of royal authority. Every dish, every decoration, every musician serves the same purpose: to remind everyone present who rules England. And judging by contemporary accounts, the effort succeeds. Guests leave impressed by the scale of the celebration. But compared to what awaits at the court of Burgundy in the next chapter, even this magnificent wedding feast will seem almost restrained. If the wedding feast of Richard II was designed to impress guests, the next banquet was designed to leave them wondering whether they had accidentally wandered into a dream, or perhaps a very expensive fever. The year is 1454, the location is Lille, in the powerful Duchy of Burgundy, and the host is Philip the Good, one of the wealthiest rulers in Europe. Burgundy at this time is astonishingly rich. Its cities thrive on trade. Its court is famous for luxury. Its nobles compete constantly to display elegance, wealth, and sophistication. Naturally, when Philip decides to host a feast, moderation is not invited. The event becomes known as the Feast of the Golden Pheasant. Even the name sounds expensive. Guests arrive expecting something extraordinary. They are not disappointed. The great hall is transformed into a world of spectacle. Elaborate decorations cover every surface. Rich fabrics hang from walls. Golden ornaments gleam beneath candlelight. Musicians fill the room with music while servants move in carefully organised formations. Then the entertainments begin, and this is where things become truly unusual. Medieval feasts often included performances. This feast includes entire theatrical productions. Mechanical devices roll through the hall. Actors perform dramatic scenes. Artificial castles appear. Mythological creatures are displayed. At one point, a giant pie is reportedly presented with living birds released from inside, because apparently serving food normally had become far too predictable. The guests watch in amazement. The feast is not progressing like a meal. It is unfolding like a series of increasingly bizarre surprises. Course after course arrives. Roasted game, exotic birds, fresh fish, rich sauces, sweet pastries, rare wines. Every dish prepared with extraordinary care. Every presentation designed to attract attention. But the true purpose of the feast extends beyond food. Europe is still reacting to the fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans the previous year. Many Christian rulers are discussing the possibility of a new crusade. Philip wants to position himself as a leader of that effort. The feast becomes a political stage. Nobles make vows. Speeches are delivered. Promises are exchanged. At the centre of the ceremony stands a magnificent golden pheasant. The bird becomes a symbol of the commitments being made. Whether everyone intended to keep those promises is another question entirely. History is full of impressive speeches delivered shortly before people discover other priorities. Still, as the evening comes to an end, guests leave having witnessed one of the most spectacular banquets of the Middle Ages. A feast so extravagant that centuries later, historians still talk about it. And remarkably, even greater displays of power await inside the palaces of the Ottoman sultans. If the Feast of the Golden Pheasant showcased the wealth of Burgundy, the Ottoman imperial banquet demonstrated something even more intimidating: control. Because when foreign ambassadors entered the palaces of the Ottoman sultans, they were not simply attending dinner. They were witnessing the machinery of an empire. The setting is Constantinople, now the capital of the Ottoman world. Behind the walls of the imperial palace lies a city within a city. Gardens stretch across vast grounds. Courtyards connect magnificent buildings. Guards stand at every important entrance. Everything is organised. Everything is deliberate. Nothing is accidental. Foreign envoys arriving at the palace often expect noise and chaos from such a massive court. Instead, they encounter discipline. The silence alone is unsettling. Hundreds of officials move through the palace performing their duties with remarkable precision. Servants, administrators, soldiers and attendants seem to operate as parts of a single machine. Visitors quickly understand the intended message. This empire is powerful, and it knows exactly what it is doing. When banquet time arrives, guests are escorted into grand halls prepared for the occasion. The decorations are impressive but not excessive. Unlike many European courts, the Ottomans often prefer controlled magnificence rather than theatrical extravagance. The confidence of the empire does not require giant pies filled with birds. Although one suspects some ambassadors might have appreciated the effort, the food begins arriving, and it arrives in astonishing quantities. Rice dishes scented with spices, roasted lamb, tender poultry, fresh fish, stuffed vegetables, sweet pastries dripping with honey, fruits gathered from provinces stretching across 3 continents. Every region of the empire seems represented on the tables. The meal itself becomes a map of Ottoman power. Guests sample dishes influenced by Turkish, Arab, Persian, Balkan and Mediterranean traditions. Each bite reminds them just how vast the empire has become. Yet the food is only part of the experience. The true purpose of the banquet is diplomatic. Ambassadors carefully observe everything around them: the clothing of officials, the behaviour of guards, the efficiency of servants, the wealth displayed throughout the palace. Every detail provides information. Every detail sends a message. At the centre of it all sits the Sultan, calm, controlled, confident. Unlike rulers who constantly seek attention, the Sultan often appears almost detached from the spectacle surrounding him. And that restraint can be more impressive than any display of extravagance. Because the greatest power is not always the loudest. As the feast continues late into the evening, many foreign visitors come to the same conclusion. They have not merely attended a banquet, they have witnessed one of the most powerful governments on earth presenting itself at its absolute best. And in the next century, one king in France will attempt to make even that seem modest. If the Ottoman sultans used banquets to demonstrate control, King Louis XIV of France turned dining into something altogether different: a public performance. At the Palace of Versailles, even eating dinner became a form of royal theatre, and the star of the show was always the king. By the late 17th century, Louis XIV had transformed himself into the most powerful monarch in Europe. He called himself the Sun King, and like the sun, everything in his world was expected to revolve around him, including supper. The setting could hardly be more magnificent. Versailles glittered with gold, mirrors, marble, and endless gardens. Hundreds of nobles lived at court, competing constantly for royal favour. And when the king sat down to eat, many of them gathered simply to watch. Not join him, watch him. This may sound strange today. It seemed strange to some people then as well. But access to the king was a privilege. Being present during his meals offered opportunities to gain attention, secure influence, and remind everyone that you belonged among France's elite. The evening meal, known as the Grand Couvert, became one of the most famous dining rituals in Europe. Courtiers crowded into the room. Foreign ambassadors observed carefully. Servants moved with military precision. Then the king arrived. Immediately, all eyes turned toward him. The meal itself was extraordinary. Dozens of dishes covered the tables: roasted game, pheasants, partridges, veal, beef, fish from distant waters, fresh fruits from royal gardens, pastries crafted by some of the finest cooks in Europe. Rich sauces accompanied nearly everything. French cuisine was becoming an art form, and Versailles served as its grand stage. Course after course appeared before the king. Some visitors were astonished by the quantity. Others were astonished by how much Louis himself could eat. The king reportedly possessed a formidable appetite. One dinner might include multiple soups, several large portions of meat, game birds, salads, fruit, and desserts. Modern physicians would probably have several concerns, yet the spectacle was not really about food. The food was merely the prop. The true purpose was power. Every noble present understood that the king controlled careers, fortunes, and futures. A glance from Louis could elevate a courtier. A dismissal could ruin one. The supper reinforced this reality every evening. As candles reflected from mirrors and silver tableware, Versailles became a stage where authority was performed with remarkable effectiveness. Guests left impressed not only by the luxury, but by the system itself. Everything revolved around one man, and for decades that man made France the envy of Europe. If Versailles represented the peak of royal dining inside a palace, the next feast took place on an even grander stage, an entire landscape. The year is 1520. The rulers are King Henry VIII and King Francis I. The goal is simple: demonstrate friendship. The actual method is considerably more complicated. Each king intends to outshine the other with a display of wealth so extravagant that future generations will still be talking about it 5 centuries later. Remarkably, they succeed. The meeting takes place between England and France near Calais. For weeks, workers transform open countryside into a temporary city of luxury. Magnificent tents cover the fields. Temporary palaces rise from the ground. Fountains flow with wine. Rich fabrics glitter in the sunlight. Thousands of nobles, servants, soldiers, musicians, cooks and attendants arrive from both kingdoms. The scale is astonishing. Visitors describe golden cloth covering buildings, decorations worth fortunes, and enough luxury to bankrupt smaller nations. Hence the name, the Field of the Cloth of Gold. The feast itself becomes one of the most famous diplomatic banquets in history. Every day brings new entertainments, banquets, tournaments, masquerades, dancing, music, archery contests, wrestling matches, and endless opportunities for each king to demonstrate his magnificence. The food arrives in unbelievable quantities. Thousands of animals are slaughtered to feed the gathering. Roasted oxen turn slowly over fires. Venison arrives from royal hunting grounds. Swans and peacocks decorate banquet tables. Fish, pastries, fruit, and imported delicacies appear in endless succession. Wine flows so freely that many participants probably remember the event somewhat differently than it actually occurred, assuming they remembered it at all. At the centre of everything stand the two monarchs. Henry is tall, athletic, and eager to impress. Francis is charismatic, cultured, and equally determined not to be outdone. Both men understand the true purpose of the gathering. This is diplomacy through spectacle. Military power can be displayed through armies. Economic power can be displayed through trade. Royal power, however, is best displayed through a feast so extravagant that people spend decades discussing the menu. For several weeks, the celebrations continue. Europe watches with fascination. The kings embrace. The nobles celebrate. The banquets grow larger. The expenses grow even larger. And yet, for all the friendship on display, the political alliance proves surprisingly fragile. Within a few years, the two kingdoms are enemies again. The feast fades. The tents disappear. The wine stops flowing. But the memory remains. One of the most expensive and spectacular royal gatherings ever recorded, and somehow one final feast still surpasses them all. After centuries of royal banquets, one feast would become famous not only for its luxury, but for the strange irony that history later attached to it. The year is 1770. Europe's most powerful royal families are celebrating the marriage of two teenagers, the Austrian Archduchess Marie Antoinette and the future King Louis XVI of France. At the time, nobody knows how the story will end. Nobody imagines revolution. Nobody imagines guillotines. Nobody imagines the collapse of one of Europe's oldest monarchies. For now, there is only celebration. And what a celebration it is! The French court spares no expense. Versailles already stands as the most magnificent palace in Europe, and the wedding festivities transform it into an even greater spectacle. Thousands of guests arrive. Nobles travel from across France and beyond. Ambassadors attend in dazzling uniforms. Musicians, entertainers, servants, cooks, and officials work tirelessly to keep the celebrations running. The entire kingdom seems determined to celebrate. The banquet halls glitter with candlelight. Crystal chandeliers reflect endless points of light. Gold decorations cover walls and furniture. Expensive porcelain and silver tableware line the tables. Every surface appears designed to remind guests that they are standing at the centre of one of the wealthiest courts in Europe. Then comes the food. The royal kitchens operate like a military campaign. Hundreds of cooks prepare elaborate dishes. Roasted game, fresh fish, rich sauces, rare fruits, delicate pastries, luxurious desserts. Every course arrives with perfect timing. Every plate reflects the extraordinary skill of French cuisine. Guests eat for hours. Music fills the halls. Conversations flow as freely as the wine. The young bride and groom sit at the centre of the celebration, surrounded by the highest ranks of European society. To those attending, the future appears secure. France seems powerful. The monarchy seems permanent. The wealth of Versailles appears limitless. Yet history enjoys a certain sense of humour. Because while nobles feast beneath golden ceilings, many ordinary people across France struggle with rising costs, poor harvests, and growing economic pressure. The contrast remains mostly invisible during the celebrations, but it exists. Quietly, patiently, waiting. Within 2 decades, the world surrounding Versailles will change completely. The palace that hosted one of the most extravagant wedding feasts in history will become a symbol of royal excess. The young queen celebrated at this banquet will become one of history's most famous monarchs, for reasons she would certainly have preferred to avoid. But before revolution transformed Europe, one final royal feast would demonstrate wealth on a scale almost beyond belief, and would become the ultimate symbol of royal extravagance. If history had decided to hold a competition for royal extravagance, King George IV of Britain would have entered with tremendous confidence and an unlimited budget. By the time of his coronation in 1821, George had spent decades cultivating a reputation for luxury. He loved fine clothing, lavish palaces, expensive art, and spectacular entertainments. Most importantly, he loved being admired. His coronation feast would ensure exactly that. The event took place at Westminster Hall, one of the oldest and most prestigious ceremonial spaces in England. For centuries, kings and queens had celebrated major occasions there. None quite like this. Preparations took months.